about to see is based on a true case, prosecuted by the Office of Evel J. Younger, District Attorney, Los Angeles County. Certain names and locations have been changed to protect the innocent.
I just got back. Tell him I'm on my way.
Black, no sugar.
Thanks.
Where you been all morning?
Worcester detectives keeping tabs on those witnesses in the Robinson conviction in case the Supreme Court kicks it back for retrial.
Fine. I've been talking to Miller Levy this morning. He says you're clear to take a case.
What have you got?
Murder. Murder one, if we can nail it down. That's 2 years of hard work by a good cop. Sheriff's detective named George Andrushin.
I know Andy. This the victim?
Mm-hmm.
Stanley Brokaw, 63, retired architect. Attending physician lists cause of death as acute bronchial congestion. What's that, pneumonia?
More or less.
Condition resulted from a head injury sustained in an auto accident. How does a guy get pneumonia in an auto accident?
Head injury in the accident supposedly caused brain damage. I can't tell you how it works medically. Ask the coroner. He's expecting you downstairs. Meanwhile, I'll have my girl call Andrushin. He'll meet you there.
Good enough.
Now.
Oh, Buck, fill me in a little. Who's the suspect?
The guy's wife, Mary Brokaw. She's a nurse.
Real nurse?
Registered.
Why her?
Because she was married to another guy in Phoenix, Arizona 2 years ago. He died pretty much the same way.
Motive?
Insurance, probably. She collected on both of them.
What did Phoenix do about it?
Nothing. No evidence. She was never charged.
What's our case, Buck?
There is no case. I'm expecting you to build one.
Buck, you're the only guy I know who can make a compliment sound like a threat.
You want red apples, you should have stayed at Michigan Law and taken that teaching job.
Hey, wait a minute, Buck. I was on...
Look, Paul, I'm not in the mood. Damn it, Andrushin's been in and out of this office for the last 2 years trying to get us to file on this dame. I've had to turn him down because there were no hard facts I could take into court. All right, I'm doing my job. But meanwhile, a man is dead, and maybe I could have stopped it from happening. Brokaw died Friday. You want to believe I've had a long, lousy weekend?
Okay, Buck. She's killing people and we can't tag her. Now, what's the hang-up?
We can't prove murder.
Come again?
You heard me. Remember that old movie joke about corpus delicti? Well, we got it, but it ain't funny. We can't charge her or anyone else with murder unless we can first prove that a murder was committed. And the coroner says we can't.
Stanley Brokaw had no brain damage as a result of the automobile accident.
And there was no brain damage.
No damage resulting from physical violence, but there was damage, all right. The whole forward part of his brain was deteriorated so that it was not more than a sponge.
Hi, Paul. Doc, sorry I'm late. I was out when Compton's office called.
Doesn't matter, I'm still catching up. Andy, the doctor tells me the accident here was a phony. Was there an accident?
Oh, yeah, LAPD report and all. Brokaw was driving. He was alone. Car came out of a driveway, smacked him. No big deal. Both drivers exchanged license and insurance information. Brokaw was healthy enough to drive home on his own.
Well, why did he go to the hospital?
His wife brought him there 2 days later. She filed an accident injury claim as soon as he was admitted.
Well, if the accident was as insignificant as you say, why did the hospital admit him?
He complained of dizziness and nausea. His left eyelid was drooping. Pupil was dilated. His wife said it was a head injury. She's a nurse. The hospitals don't like to take chances with those symptoms, especially on a reported head injury. It's all in there.
I know, but I was just handed this.
I'll tell you what's funny. At the time of the accident, Brokaw and his wife weren't even living together. Been separated for 2 months. Suddenly, she shows up.
No, I'll accept that. Man of his age, living alone. He's been in an accident, so he phones his wife even though they're on the outs.
He was 63, right? How old was she?
31, good looking.
What about the first husband in Phoenix?
His name was Norman Lester. He was 68.
Let me guess. Both husbands had money.
And they married her, not when they died. I said she was good looking. I didn't say I was crazy about her.
All right. 2 men are dead. The one in Phoenix is out of our jurisdiction, but not Brokaw. You think she killed him. How'd she do it?
With a needle.
Paul, I've told you certain symptoms of brain failure and its consequences. Now, these very same symptoms can be produced without any physical violence whatsoever. A simple injection of a certain substance. For example...
Please give me an example.
Insulin.
Insulin? That's what they give diabetics.
Yeah, only she's no diabetic, and neither were the 2 victims.
I must tell you, frankly, I didn't even think of insulin until Andrushin here posed it as a possibility.
After her first husband died, the Phoenix police found some empty medical vials in her trash. One of them had contained insulin.
She was a nurse. Was she on a case?
No.
Why didn't the Phoenix PD jump on that?
Same reason we can't.
For what reason? He was injected with insulin and died. Wouldn't the autopsy show that?
No, I'm afraid not. You see, insulin is a natural hormone in the human body. The body produces it in the pancreas. Now, a natural disorder could make the pancreas produce too much insulin. In diabetics, for example, the body produces too little insulin.
Did he have a normal pancreas?
Well, he did. I had tissue samples taken of his various organs before I released the body for cremation.
Which is going to happen at 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Doctor, I'm not asking you to explain how the insulin got in the body. Just that it was there and enough to have killed him.
I wish I could, but I can't.
Who can?
Well, anyone can, but one of the foremost experts on insulin in the whole country is right here at the State Medical Center. Dr. Rudolph Granger. He's doing research on diabetes.
Please do me a favor. Send those tissues, tell him I'll be around to see him.
What? Right, but Paul, you must understand that a massive injection of insulin could have destroyed Brokaw's brain and then disappeared in his system before he actually died.
Which means we can't prove he died as a result of insulin.
Yes, insulin is not a foreign substance in the human body like arsenic or cyanide, where we can say, there it is, that's it. There is no test to establish insulin as a criminal agency.
I see. What you're telling me is this woman figured out a way to kill people and get away with it. Is that it?
I don't know what else to tell you.
Neither do I.
Just think about all the times I haven't bothered you.
All right, your credit's good.
What's the point in having a special investigation division if you can't get an investigator when you need one?
You go right for the throat, don't you, pal?
Shortest distance.
Sid, you were a trial deputy before you became head of SID. Now you know what my problems are.
That's right, and I know my problems, too. I'm always short of investigators, even for the cases this division is supposed to cover, like corruption in public service, organized crime. Your headache isn't even one of those, Paul.
Don't read the book to me. I want you to violate your precious integrity, which has always been questionable anyway. I want Bob Ramirez.
Oh, sure. So do a dozen other guys.
Look, Paul.
I think I'm a pretty fair country lawyer.
Fair. If you were handling the defense on this case, I'd kill myself.
I just mean I'm not playing jurisdictional games with you. I'm willing to give you anything you need. But from what you've told me, what good is an investigator going to do you? My detectives can find evidence, Paul. They can't invent it. Yes?
A sergeant at Drushian's on the phone for Mr. Ryan. Says it's important.
Ask him to hold in a minute, will you, please?
Yes, sir.
Miss Andrusian seems to be doing all the investigating you need.
He's fine. But he's just one man. I told you about Wellington Clinic. It needs a follow-up to the sister that died in Santa Monica. And the Phoenix thing, we haven't even touched that yet.
Race, put the sergeant on the squawk box, please.
Yes, sir.
Hello, Andy.
Hi, Paul. You remember the older man you saw at the cremation? The one who was waiting for her?
Yeah?
He's Charles Lloyd.
See Charles Lloyd?
That's the one. The airline executive. He's 65 now. He's retired.
Sounds like her kind of man. Any more?
The worst. She actually went to work for him before her husband died. As a nurse. And right now, I'm calling from a jewelry store in Beverly Hills. The two of them just left. But not before he bought her a diamond ring the size of your fist.
An engagement ring.
That's right. Third finger, left hand.
Okay, Andy, I'll see you back at the office.
Right.
Grace, get me Bob Ramirez.
We still haven't found anyone that actually saw her inject the stuff, but even when we did, the real hang-up is trying to prove that insulin itself was the killing agent. Clever, huh?
Different, anyway. Let's see. Can you prove she was alone with the victims in the hospital?
I can't with Brokaw, probably the others.
Okay. You can establish she had expert knowledge with and of insulin. Money motive should hold up from the insurance records.
You're gonna have to round that up.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Ryan, you remember you kicked around that insulin thing with me?
Oh, sure.
Well, you know the bar exam panic I've got coming up. I read everything everywhere twice. I think I saw something about an insulin murder case.
You're kidding.
No, sir. I can't give you the details offhand, but some guy in England killed his wife with insulin.
Was he convicted?
Yes, I think so.
Where's the case? Do you have it?
No, sir, I just happened to be looking for something else.
Let's get it.
Well, we don't have English cases here. I'd have to climb through the county law library.
I'll give you a leg up.
Now? I have a date tonight, Mr. Ryan. A promising date.
Tell me about it. I've got Buck Compton and his wife coming for dinner.
Hey, it's important, Larry.
Don't be a doctor, my uncle said. They'll call you any hour of the day or the night.
Okay. I'll coordinate with Andrusian first thing. He might as well stay in Santa Monica with his sisters, Des, and I'll get the details about the first husband from Phoenix. Oh, what about this new man she's got?
Well, before he's worth killing, she has to marry him.
Yeah. Well, that only takes a blood test and $6.
Don't you miss it?
Did you miss washing your hair at 4:30 every morning?
Well, not if I could go back to sleep right away.
Hi, Buck.
Hi.
Hi, Donna.
Hi.
I'm awfully sorry I'm late.
About time you got here. I've been nursing your fire for an hour.
Ah, take a shower and I'm all yours.
Donna says one of my old pictures is on the Late Show tonight. Can you hardly wait?
Which one?
The one where I get ravaged by the motorcycle gang.
Oh, the comedy.
Can't even be a star in my own home. Do you want a drink?
Yeah, in a minute. Excuse me.
Buck, what are you doing to my fella?
Sounded good, Buck. But the guy in England actually was caught because of a fluke. Kind of fluke we don't have.
Well, was insulin established as the criminal agency?
Oh, yeah. The guy was a hospital attendant. He injected his wife with insulin, saying that they were vitamins. She took a bath immediately afterward, and because of the injection, she got woozy. Fell down in the bathroom, broke her neck in the tub. Now, she actually died before the insulin assimilated into her bloodstream. The coroner did find injection sites and also insulin in the skin.
Well, that's something.
No, not really. It's easy to prove that an overdose of insulin is deadly, but that's not the same as proving someone died because of that overdose.
Yeah, but you're getting there. What about your doctor specialist?
He's still looking at mice,
Test tubes and slides, and he could still be doing it when Mary Brokaw decides to go on a honeymoon and come back a widow.
You got a case against her?
What do you mean?
You know what I mean. I know what you mean. You want to charge her so she'll get uptight and throw away her needle. Have you got a case, Paul?
You know damn well I don't, Buck. But if we can let her know we're on to her, maybe it'll stop her from doing a number on this new guy.
No, that's no good. We can't afford to fire blanks on this one. If we put her on the line and the grand jury fails to indict, we'll really be turning her loose to commit slaughter.
Buck, if we don't shake her up, she may marry this Charles Lloyd and finish him. Now, you lived with that once. You want to live with it again?
Nope. I don't want any of it. But that's not my choice, and it isn't yours. You show me an easy way, and I'll take it. But one thing I'm sure as hell not going to do is advertise a murder gimmick that'll tempt any nut who can get his hands on insulin and a hypodermic. Not until we can prove that it doesn't work. That anybody who tries it can be stopped and put away.
You're talking about me, not we.
Don't tell me whom I'm talking about. I'm talking about we. From us right up to Ev Younger. What the hell do you think you are, the Lone Ranger? Better turn the stakes.
Hi. How do you do? Mr. Ryan?
Yes, sir.
You wanted to talk to me?
Yes, I did.
Frankly, Mr. Ryan, I don't see where my relationship with Mrs. Brokaw, professional or personal, has anything to do with the district attorney's office.
We're investigating her husband's death.
You investigate traffic accidents?
The coroner does. That is up until the time he's certain it was an accident. Yes, sir.
I don't think I understand you.
Did you know that Mrs. Brokaw was married when she first came to work for you?
Yes, she told me so. I've been having a little heart trouble lately, Mr. Ryan. I simply hired a nurse.
Yes, sir. Did she also tell you that she'd been widowed before?
No, not at first. Why should she? Later, when our relationship changed, yes, she told me that her first husband had died in Phoenix.
In a hit-and-run accident. His symptoms and the way he died were almost a carbon copy of the death of the late Mr. Brokaw.
Exactly what are you trying to tell me?
Mrs. Brokaw's sister also died. It was about 10 years ago. Ostensibly, she was the victim of an automobile accident.
Ostensibly?
In each case, Mrs. Brokaw was the recipient of a rather sizable insurance payment.
Mr. Ryan, Mrs. Brokaw and I are going to be married.
I know.
Then you're being crude and insulting.
Mr. Lloyd?
I'm a lot older than you, Ryan. Don't make me foolish enough to forget that.
Of course he chased you. He's 65 years old, and you were talking about the one woman who's turned him on like he's never been turned on before.
So she turns him off.
I've been talking to the Phoenix PD all morning. Remember those broken medical vials they found around the house after her first husband died?
Yes. One of them had been insulin, right?
Right. Another had been vitamins, B12. But a third was a little number called methyl testosterone.
Methyl?
Testosterone. It's a sex hormone. Makes young men out of old ones. Anyway, she jazzes them up and then provides her own charms to show them what great lovers they really are. Actually, the old boys flip over, wouldn't you?
Why don't we forget this whole thing and take this gal out to lunch?
Huh?
Bob, is this stuff injected the same way as insulin would be?
Same as insulin or a dozen other things in the butt.
And she can tell the man that she's injecting them with vitamins or methyl, whatever it is. And all the time she's shooting them full of insulin, huh?
She gives him a shot before she takes him to the hospital. She tells him it's vitamins or some other good medicine, but it's really just enough insulin to make him sick and woozy.
And then she finishes them off when she visits the hospital.
Hey, Andy, coffee?
Thanks. Paul, the Santa Monica hospital records show the sister died just the way the husbands did. She was brought in as a hit-and-run victim suffering from head injuries.
Brought in by Mary.
Same way, dizzy spells, one eyelid drooping, pupil dilated. Mary visited her alone twice a day for a week, then the sister went into a coma and died.
Our girl got the insurance.
She asked for $100,000 accident, but the insurance investigators jumped all over her and the hospital, so she settled for 15.
Just a nervous beginner at the time.
That drooping eyelid business is something. It's the way she got her victims into the hospital with a record of a head injury.
Must be some kind of a phony.
I asked the attending physician in Phoenix. Of course, he wouldn't admit to diagnosing anything wrong, and that's going to be one of our hang-ups. But he did say there are several drugs that will produce those symptoms in the eye.
Good. It's beginning to add up. We have to tie her into those drugs. Hospitals, drugstores, I'm hitting all of those right near where she used to live.
Hello. Hold on, please, one moment. Bob, Las Vegas.
Yeah, hello. Hello, Danny. Yes. Okay. All right. Thanks, Danny. I'll check back with you later.
Did you win?
Maybe. Our nurse spent 1.5 years in Las Vegas before she moved to Phoenix. The friend that called me is a security officer in one of the hotels.
Was she working there?
Private cases. Her last one being a professional gambler named Sam Watson.
Last one meaning he's dead.
Yeah, he sure is. She took him to the hospital herself.
What we draw? Flight 216 to Phoenix, good. Now what about that group in Vegas? Fine. Now what about my wife? Line one? Be a good girl and pack my overnight case, will you? White shirt, pair of socks, my shaving gear. I'll swing by and pick it up on my way to the airport. No, honey. I won't be gone that long. What? Stick in the freezer. We'll have it tomorrow night. Sorry, sweetheart. Younger just gave me the green light to move on this thing. Come on now, V. You know better than that. I'll see you in 30 minutes. Memo. Case control sheet. People versus Mrs. Mary Brokaw. August 10th. Met with Chief Deputy District Attorney, suggested we go for grand jury indictment. Had subsequent meeting this date with District Attorney. Received approval to proceed with depositions and correlate out-of-state evidence. Phase 1. Proceed to Arizona this date. Special Investigator Ramirez. Meet with Phoenix Coroner and Detective Sergeant Edward Roth. Verify cause of death of first victim and further document empty insulin containers found in Mary Brokaw's refuse. Phase 2. Return to Los Angeles, proceed to Wellington Clinic. Take registered nurse Lucy Anderson's deposition to detail witness knowledge of Mary Brokaw's activities while subject was working insulin shock ward. Phase 3. Santa Monica Hospital. Acquire attending physician Dr. Ellis Anders' deposition regarding circumstances surrounding the death of Mary Brokaw's sister. Phase 4. Meet with Dr. Rudolph Granger. Underscore urgency for positive conclusion that insulin was the criminal agency responsible for the death of Stanley Brokaw. Phase 5. Transport Las Vegas casino pit boss to Los Angeles Hall of Justice. Acquire under oath testimony concerning Mary Brokaw's close association with professional gambler, one Sam Watson, deceased. Final phase. Correlate and catalog testimony of 111 witnesses interviewed. Review in detail recent Supreme Court decisions on capital punishment.
Come on, Paul. Let us know now, and we can enter. Come on, just a clue.
Let the record reflect the foreman of the grand jury has handed to the court one indictment. The court finds that the indictment is a true bill. The clerk is ordered to file the indictment. A bench warrant will be issued forthwith.
Excuse me, Your Honor. We've been in touch with the defense counsel. He's requested the opportunity to surrender his claim.
Very well. The bench warrant will be held for 1 week. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This court is in recess.
Hey, here she comes. Hey, no, boys, let's go. Hey, Nick, can you tell us how you're going to plead her? How are you going to plead her? What do you think? Come on, give us a story. Well, how about you, Mary? Mary, how about it? Tell us how you're going to plead her. Do you like L.A.? Come on. Is this going to be a big one? You'll have to get up. Give us a story. How about you?
Ryan? the usual crowd, I see.
I don't mind. They want to try her in the newspapers, that's your problem. Well, how long do you figure the trial to take? 10 days? 2 weeks?
What? At least. And probably longer.
Is that necessary? You'll just be repeating yourself.
Well, that's what she did, isn't it?
You bring in the cases from Phoenix and Las Vegas. You got 4 different doctors who signed 4 different death certificates. Not one of them associating the deaths with insulin. Now, it's hard enough to get one doctor to admit he was wrong. You expect 4 of them to do it? Meantime, criticizing each other along the way?
I'll try and direct traffic.
Well, the best you'll get in a jury's mind is a maybe. And maybes are what reasonable doubts are made of.
1 maybe? Maybe. 2 maybes? Coincidence. But 4 maybes?
Uh-huh. Why don't we stop kidding each other? Without an eyewitness, which you don't have, you can't prove my client injected anything into anybody. Or you can't even prove that any of the so-called victims died as a result of insulin.
I'm glad you appreciate my problems.
Love them. Love them. There's not a thing on the books involving insulin.
There will be. Every precedent has to start somewhere.
Well, at least you're not huffing and bluffing.
I didn't expect you to roll over and play dead either, if that's what you mean.
Are you going to ask me to accept a lesser charge?
Would you?
Of course not. Are you asking?
Of course not.
See you in court.
Bad luck.
You need my bad luck.
Court calls people of the state of California versus Mrs. Mary Brokaw, defendant.
The defendant waives statement of her rights, Your Honor, and is here with counsel ready to proceed.
Mr. Ryan, will you please arraign the defendant?
May the record show that I am delivering to defense counsel a copy of the indictment and the grand jury transcript. Is Mary Brokaw your true name?
Yes.
In Superior Court Indictment Case number A207399, you're charged with 2 counts of murder. I ask you now if you waive further reading of this indictment.
Yes.
In each of these 2 counts of murder, how do you plead?
Not guilty.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense would like to enter a motion for discovery. The district attorney has in his possession certain medical and financial records which will be introduced in evidence. Now, we would also like copies of all depositions and/or signed statements and/or taped recordings taken from all witnesses, including those the people may not call to testify.
Any problem on that, counsel?
No, Your Honor, I am available for defense counsel at this time.
So ordered. The defendant will be remanded to the custody of the sheriff. Trial is set for Monday, October 5th at 10 a.m., Department 110 of the Superior Court.
Mrs. Anderson, you have testified that you considered Mrs. Brokaw, or Mary Keene when you knew her, to be one of the best nurses at State Hospital. Is that not so?
Yes, sir.
Do you consider her less of a nurse, particularly at the age of 20, because she asked unusual questions? Or tried unusual experiments in technique, which harmed no one and possibly could have helped many?
No, sir.
Do you know of any specific circumstance where Mrs. Brokaw said or did anything that would make you question her conduct as a nurse?
I was only explaining what...
Please answer my question, Mrs. Anderson. Did you have any professional criticism of the defendant before you spoke to the district attorney's office?
I object, Your Honor. Defense counsel is trying to give the impression...
I think the jury is sophisticated enough to know that the district attorney briefs his witnesses.
Never mind, that's enough.
Counsel will approach the bench.
If you're both trying to probe the limits of my indulgence, I'll tell you right now, I'll evaluate the merits of an objection without any speeches or interpretations from either of you. Is that clear?
You can't unring a bell, Your Honor. Even if you admonish the jury to disregard, they've already heard defense counsel's insinuations.
I appreciate the district attorney's objection, Your Honor. I think his passion's exaggerated. I'm not here to quibble over a point of law. I'm fighting for my client's life.
The court will give you both sufficient latitude within its discretion. I would like the jury to understand that when counsel is called to approach the bench, it is not because we're keeping secrets from you. Our purpose is to see that the rights of both the people and the defendant are preserved within the law. The court sustains the objection. The jury will disregard the last outbursts of counsel. Defense counsel's last question will be stricken from the record. You may proceed, Mr. Devaney.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
May this witness be excused?
No objection, Your Honor.
No objection.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson. You may step down now.
Murder One, starring Robert Conrad, continues in a moment.
The people called Dr. Ellis Anders.
Of course, it was more than 10 years ago, and I wasn't a young man then. But I guess you always remember the cases that remind you how little you know.
You're referring, Doctor, to the case of Elizabeth Keene, the defendant's late sister.
Yes. Of course, I knew she'd been admitted to the hospital as a hit-and-run victim, but she was fully ambulatory and responsive.
Dr. Court has given you permission to refer to your medical records if you like.
Oh, thank you. If she'd not lost the reflex in her left eyelid, that and the dilation of the left pupil itself, she probably would have been given a sedative and sent home. With those symptoms, combined with a reported head injury, well, we don't like to take chances.
But you did not consider her condition serious.
I ordered the customary lab tests, blood, urinalysis, but she had no cranial contusions.
Cuts and bruises on the head?
Yes, nothing like that. Nothing that indicated she'd suffered a severe blow to the head.
Did her blood sugar test come back normal?
Well, slightly low, but just slightly. The mental shock of the accident could have produced that.
How long was she in the hospital?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Even though you considered not admitting her at all, and her lab test was relatively normal?
Well, no. Her condition deteriorated her first night in the hospital. Her blood pressure rose suddenly. She became flushed and perspired, complained of nausea and dizzy spells.
What did you do then, Doctor?
We ran another blood sugar on her, of course. Her count had dropped close to the minimum. We put her on glucose immediately.
This was less than 12 hours after she had been admitted and showed a moderately low blood sugar reading.
Yeah.
Well, how do you explain such a dramatic change?
Well, unless I know the nature of brain damage, I can't explain certain manifestations.
But you presume brain damage because of the hit-and-run accident report?
Yes.
I see. Doctor, did anyone visit Miss Keene during her first day in the hospital?
Yes, her sister, Mary Keene.
You're referring to the defendant by what was then her maiden name?
Yes.
Did anyone else visit the patient that day?
No one.
How many doctors, nurses, attendants, or other hospital personnel could have been alone with your patient that afternoon?
I can't really say.
But there could have been others. 2, 5, a dozen.
Well, I doubt that many.
You can't really say because you don't really know, correct?
Technically, no.
So any one of a number of people could have attended your patient, could have administered anything.
Certainly not with my knowledge.
Just as certainly without. Is that not true?
I have to admit it's possible. Yes.
Yes, indeed. I ask you now, Doctor, did you at any time in any of your reports, examinations, or in any other way indicate to anyone that you believe that this woman's death was related to insulin?
No.
And for a fact, Doctor, wasn't it you yourself who signed the death certificate, citing acute pulmonary edema, what we laymen call lung failure, as the cause of death?
Yes, I did.
Yes, you certainly did. Nothing further.
Well, yes, we were close friends. My husband and Mr. Lester had grown up together in Phoenix.
Then after the defendant married Mr. Lester, did that relationship continue?
Sure. The boys used to play golf together every Sunday. The four of us went away weekends, you know.
Then when Mr. Lester became ill, did you and your husband visit him in the hospital?
Oh, whenever we could. But when things got bad, Mary said it would be better if we didn't bother him. After all, she was a nurse. She should know such things.
Do you remember a particular time when you and the defendant visited the hospital together?
Yes. We met one day to have lunch, and then we were going to go to the hospital.
Did anything peculiar happen at that luncheon?
Yes, in the ladies' room. We'd just finished lunch, and we were fixing our makeup. Mary was,
Please continue, Mrs. Hall.
Well, I'd forgotten my lipstick. Mary's purse was right there by the sink. She was going to the bathroom. I opened her purse to get her lipstick, and I saw... Well, she had a hypodermic needle there.
Mrs. Hall, do you think it unusual for a registered nurse to carry a hypodermic needle?
Those kinds of things give me the creeps.
Answer my question, please.
I don't remember what I thought. I mean, she wasn't working at the time. We were just going to the hospital to visit her husband.
That hypodermic needle could have been in her purse for weeks, even months, isn't that so?
No. It was a new purse. I was with her when she bought it, just a few days before.
You set him up, he'll be sure to give you the knee in the clinches. Hi, Andy.
Hi, fellas.
Hi, Andy.
Hi, Andy. The casino manager and the showgirl are here from Vegas. They both have to get back tonight if they can.
I'll try, but hold the hotel reservations.
What about the Vegas hospital people?
Coming in on a later plane.
Good.
And the jury seemed to go for that Phoenix cop's testimony about finding those medical vials, didn't they?
Everybody loves a good detective story. Devaney will be sure to remind the jury in his clothes that it could just as easily be fiction as fact. He sure shook up that doctor from Santa Monica.
Stanley Brokaw's daughter, the one you saw at the cremation. When she found out her father might have been murdered, she had a breakdown.
Dad?
Yes, she's in a sanitarium.
Some of the problems that get lost in the backwash.
2:30 in the morning is not very late in Las Vegas.
You just finished your second show. Must have been tired. Or do you continue working beyond your stage performance?
I object, Your Honor. That is irrelevant and immaterial.
Where are you going, Mr. Devaney?
I'm laying a foundation to challenge the credibility of this witness, Your Honor.
Court will overrule the objection.
Well, then, to continue, Miss Rutherford. Is that the extracurricular manner in which you first met Sam Watson? Shall I repeat the question?
All right. One of the pit bosses introduced us. What's wrong with that?
Not a thing. In fact, you and Mr. Watson saw a lot of each other before he met Mrs. Brokaw. Isn't that true? Isn't that true, Miss Rutherford?
Yes.
Murder One, starring Robert Conrad, continues in a moment.
Let's face it. He's got a lot to be good about.
You think he'll put her on the witness stand?
No. Not unless he has to. And the way things are going, I don't think he does.
Jury usually expects it in a Murder One case.
Well, they'll use that in his closing remarks. You know, say there's nothing been proved that she has to defend herself against. Remember, we've only shown that people connected with her have died. Not that they've been murdered.
Sid, we're better than that.
Better? Beyond a reasonable doubt? What do you think, Buck?
I think Paul ought to put that insulin expert on the stand.
He's close, but he's not ready.
She'll be burying her next husband by the time he's ready. Look, take what he's got and then get him back later.
Buck, I don't know what he's got.
Well, I know what we've got. Trouble. Unless we get her up on that stand, we need her up there. And the only way we're going to get her up there is to put the defense on the defensive.
There's a lady I promised to buy a cocktail for.
Would you like to try for dinner?
But has to unpromise that, too. Buck Compton's buying mine. Chicken in a box.
How does that line go? I guess I'll go through life just catching colds and missing trains.
Hey.
I was at the adoption office today. They gave me an application, and I've got a ton of information booklets in the car.
Good. That's fine, honey. You been able to reach Dr. Granger yet? You know we're going to open with him tomorrow, don't you? Good. Keep trying. Now, where were we?
Right where we always seem to be. Paul, if this whole adoption thing is too much for you, why don't you just say so?
Wait a minute. Where'd that come from?
You knew I was seeing the adoption people this morning, and you couldn't wait to cancel me out.
You're hitting after the bell.
And when I start talking about it, you find any excuse to avoid the subject.
Hey, I'm doing a job. That's not any excuse.
I'm not asking you to do this for me. Not if you don't want it for yourself.
I do want it, P. I'm not saying it's the same as having one of our own. I don't think you believe that.
I'll tell you what I believe, Paul. You don't want to adopt a child. Oh, I know you won't admit that, not in so many words. But you really don't.
P, I've got a rough one going now.
I'm aware of that. But it's not asking too much, is it? Just once in a while to think about us.
Tomorrow morning, a man, if we can locate him, is going to take the stand. If he hasn't been successful, I'd say the people's case for a dime. And you know what he told us? He couldn't guarantee a damn thing. He's the top guy in his field, a medical expert. It's not just his theories we want. We've got to have positive proof. And if we don't get it, you know, it'll go down in the books. We've declared an open season on murder. If I had any time to think about anything, V, I'd give it to that doctor.
Do something for me?
Yes.
Next time you see my husband, tell him his wife dropped by.
Even if insulin is introduced exogenously.
How, Doctor?
Oh, that means orally or by injection. The living bloodstream will assimilate it very rapidly.
Will this assimilation or disappearance of insulin in the bloodstream, will it continue if the patient is in shock or coma?
Yes, as long as the heart is alive and pumping. My own theory is based on the chemical nature of insulin. It's in the report that I gave you.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness is referring to People's Exhibit 147.
It may.
Please continue, Doctor.
Well, new techniques, particularly in radioimmunological assays, permit us to examine and measure the chemical reaction of insulin on human tissue. This, of course, also includes the tissue of the brain itself.
Did you apply these tests to the samples of brain tissue which the coroner took from the late Mr. Brokaw?
I did.
Would you please tell the judge and the jury what you found?
At the time of his death, Mr. Brokaw's brain contained an inordinate amount of insulin.
Order.
No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Dr. Granger, the jury has listened to your highly technical and informative dissertation on the properties of insulin. Well and good. But shall we agree that what insulin does is one thing, and how it gets there is another?
Yes, obviously.
Now, Dr. Granger, you have testified here that you have read all the hospital records and pathological reports surrounding Mr. Brokaw's death. Did you see anything where anyone involved, any doctor, even hinted that insulin was in any way responsible for Mr. Brokaw's death?
No.
Then can you state, Dr. Granger, categorically, that insulin was in any way related to Mr. Brokaw's death?
Yes, definitely. Of course.
You've given us your opinion, Doctor. Jury will decide whether it's fact or arrogance.
Do you have any further questions of this witness?
Not at all, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Doctor, my learned adversary interrupted you at a very interesting point. You were saying that in spite of all the medical diagnosis, you were certain that the late Mr. Brokaw's death was directly attributable to a massive overdose of insulin. Is that correct?
More or less, with one qualification, which I tried to explain to the other gentleman. If no other disorder killed Mr. Brokaw first, the insulin content in his brain would have been fatal.
How can you be so sure, Doctor?
Mr. Brokaw's brain tissue, which due to his sustained low blood sugar, should have contained hardly a trace of insulin, did in fact contain twice as much insulin residue as the normal brain tissue.
What did that indicate to you, Doctor?
That sometime shortly before his death, Mr. Brokaw received a massive overdose of insulin, probably long-lasting NPH.
Doctor, I want you to be very careful about this. There's been testimony in this courtroom from all medical personnel who attended Mr. Brokaw when he was in the hospital. Every doctor, nurse, and attendant have all sworn under oath that Mr. Brokaw was never given insulin. Quite the reverse, in fact. He was on IV glucose. They've also sworn that during his 2 weeks in the hospital, by Mrs. Brokaw's request, no visitors other than herself. Now, here's my question, Doctor. Did your analysis demonstrate how long before his death Mr. Brokaw received his overdose?
Within reasonable limits. 2 or 3 days before, certainly not more than a week.
Court will be in order.
Your witness.
No questions.
Your Honor, the people rest.
Mr. Devaney?
May we have a moment, Your Honor?
Very well.
You put us in a scoring position. We're still a long way from home.
Well, the jury knows one thing for sure, at least. The victims were killed with insulin.
Yeah. Now all you gotta do is to prove that she gave it to him.
Your Honor, defense calls Mrs. Mary Brokaw. And even the prosecution, Mrs. Brokaw, has endorsed your qualifications as an able nurse. In spite of this, I still ask you, when you administered the vitamins or antibiotics or whatever to your sister or either of your husbands, could you have mistakenly administered insulin instead?
Absolutely not. None of them was diabetic. I would only give insulin to a diabetic, and then only under a physician's order.
I ask now, did you kill your sister?
I did not.
Did you kill your late husband, Stanley Brokaw?
No.
Mrs. Brokaw, did you ever kill anyone?
No. As God is my judge, I did not.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Ryan?
Mrs. Mary Brokaw. Mrs. Brokaw, I have great respect for your ability as a nurse. So much so that I'm sure that at any given time you knew exactly what you were doing. With that in mind, I now direct your attention to your first professional assignment in that capacity, as a member of the staff at Wellington Clinic. And during your time there, you became quite familiar with the symptoms of insulin shock. Isn't that so?
Yes. It was my job to recognize them.
What are those symptoms, Mrs. Brokaw?
Flushed expression, heavy perspiration.
Is that all?
Well, it depends upon the seriousness, of course.
Well, let's be serious, Mrs. Brokaw. Deadly serious.
Your Honor.
Save the imagery for your closing remarks, Mr. Ryan. We're still in cross-examination. Please, ask questions.
What are the most serious symptoms, Mrs. Brokaw?
Well, the patient could suddenly become very hungry. His skin might begin to itch. He might go into coma. Show a positive response to the Babinski test.
And convulsions. There could be convulsions.
Yes.
Well, please correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Brokaw. But these convulsions are extremely animated, isn't that so?
Well...
Did you ever see your sister in this condition, Mrs. Brokaw?
Not to that degree. And not before she entered the hospital.
But when you did see those symptoms, in any degree or combination, did you suggest to the attending physician that there might be insulin shock?
I did not. I've never questioned a physician's diagnosis in my life.
He's the hardest working lawyer I know, even during recess.
That must be true. You don't see much of them these days, do you?
Going well today?
Let's talk about you.
About us. Paul, I want you to consider very carefully what I'm about to say.
That sounds important.
It always is when two people are married and they want to stay that way.
With luck, this thing will wind up fast, not one way or another. And then we'll sit down and straighten out that adoption business. If I play my cards right, maybe I can talk the boss out a 3 days. We'll go away someplace.
That's what I had in mind. I'd like to start now.
Sure. So as I wrap things up here, I'll join you.
No, Paul. I'd like to go away alone. I think the pieces will fall into place better that way. I thought I'd go to Carmel for a few days.
And how does the rest of it go? You'll let me know where you'll be staying.
I thought I'd leave this afternoon.
I love you.
I know. That's why I'm going.
Brokaw, you weren't on a case at the time. Why were you carrying a hypodermic needle? Just to visit your sick husband in the hospital?
I didn't realize it was in my purse.
In your new purse?
Women frequently change the contents of their purses without paying much attention to them.
Mrs. Brokaw, do you remember purchasing 500 units of NPH insulin the day before you went to the hospital?
No, I'm quite certain I didn't.
Don't you remember testimony in this court? You were sitting in this court when Mr. Joseph Vatulis, a Phoenix druggist, testified that he sold you such an item.
Well, he was mistaken.
You say that under oath?
I bought many things in that drugstore. It was very close to my home. Why would I go to a neighborhood drugstore if I contemplated what you suggest?
The court prefers that I ask the questions, Mrs. Brokaw. You also heard testimony from Sergeant Edward Roth of the Phoenix Police Department, testifying to the fact that soon after your first husband died, there were some empty drug containers found in your refuse. One of them was found to have contained NPH insulin. Now, how do you explain that?
Probably from a previous case. I might have had it for months, a year even. I remember after Norman died, I went through all the junk in the house, threw everything away.
Mrs. Brokaw, didn't you buy that insulin for the premeditated purpose of injecting it into your husband?
I did not buy it.
The very next day, you took that hypodermic needle and the insulin to the hospital.
No.
And didn't you inject your husband with a deadly overdose of insulin knowing that it would kill him?
No! It's not true!
Your Honor, District Attorney has been tormenting the defendant for 2 days now with these desperate tactics. When does enough become enough?
You're out of order, Mr. Devaney. A great deal of testimony has been entered in evidence here. The court wants to give the defendant every opportunity to reply to that testimony. Would defense like a brief recess at this point?
If the court pleases.
So ordered. This court will reconvene in 20 minutes.
The timing's great. She doesn't have an honest tear in her body.
The jury's not that sophisticated.
They've got the picture by now.
They're not sure. Gentlemen, it's my jury, and I'm telling you, they're not sure. Mrs. Brokaw. Mrs. Brokaw, you and your husband were living apart when you first heard of his accident, but when you did hear, you rushed to his side because you love him very much. Isn't that correct?
Without the sarcasm, yes.
Oh, please forgive me, Mrs. Brokaw. I keep remembering that your husband became very ill the first night you went back home. Isn't that correct? Isn't that what you testified?
Yes, he did.
But you being an experienced nurse, it never occurred to you to rush your husband to the hospital that first night, did it?
It was very late. About 4 in the morning when he really got bad.
Yes, Mrs. Brokaw, he really got bad. The next morning, the admitting doctor recorded that your husband was extremely flushed, perspiring heavily, and complained of being very hungry. Didn't all that sound very familiar to you, Mrs. Brokaw? Doesn't it sound familiar now?
He'd received a head injury in the automobile accident.
Yes. And his first blood tests in the hospital showed he was suffering acute hypoglycemia, a low blood sugar condition. Isn't that correct?
Physical shock, particularly to the head, can make a person hypoglycemic.
Acutely in your husband's case, Mrs. Brokaw.
Object to that, Your Honor. Witness not qualified.
Sustained.
Your husband was suffering from an extremely low blood sugar count. The hospital immediately put him on intravenous glucose and he began to respond successfully. After a few days, he was sitting up in bed, eating ice cream, and making jokes with the nurses. Isn't that correct?
He was feeling better.
Yes, he was feeling better. But at your request, as in the case with your sister, Mr. Watson, and your first husband, Mr. Brokaw was permitted no visitors other than yourself. Isn't that correct?
The doctor and I thought it best.
The doctor has already testified that it was arbitrary. He was only acceding to your request. Now, it was your idea, wasn't it, Mrs. Brokaw?
Well, I suggested it. The doctor agreed.
Then when you saw your husband that night, he was sitting up in bed, eating ice cream, and making jokes with the nurses. After you had been the only person that had seen him, he went into a deep coma. A severe hypoglycemic coma.
Yes, it was unexpected.
And you rushed immediately to the hospital.
Yes.
And you saw your husband in this condition. Let me read to you the recorded testimony. Flushed expression, perspiring heavily, in deep coma, and experiencing violent convulsions. Limbs extremely rigid and out of control. What did you think when you saw those symptoms, Mrs. Brokaw?
He was in shock.
Insulin shock.
Same objection.
Your Honor, this witness has been qualified over and over again as an expert in insulin shock.
Your Honor.
I'll overrule the objection.
And when you saw your husband, the man you loved very much, in the agony of coma and convulsion, which you, above anyone else, could identify, what did you do?
I'm not a doctor.
I am talking, Mrs. Brokaw, about the man you love very much. I know you're not a doctor. Are you a woman?
Oh, come on now, Counselor. Your Honor.
Sustained.
Your Honor, I have no further questions of this witness.
Any redirect, Mr. Devaney?
No, Your Honor. Defense rests.
You may step down, Mrs. Brokaw. Will there be any rebuttal by the people, Mr. Ryan?
No, Your Honor. The people rest.
Are counsel prepared to offer their closing arguments at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
We are, Your Honor.
Mr. Ryan, you may proceed.
Your Honor. Defense counsel. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have heard the testimony of 111 witnesses. But now each and every one of you, alone with your own conscience, will be asked to judge.
A reasonable doubt. Now remember that, my friends, because that is the law. And the law is why we're here. Of its 111 witnesses, the prosecution has not produced one person, not one single person, who actually saw Mary Brokaw commit any crime. She stands before you innocent now, and innocent unless you find otherwise. Your decision means life or death to Mary Brokaw. She has admitted no wrong. She has done no wrong. Her life, ladies and gentlemen, is in your hands.
From the White House to Capitol Hill, according to informed sources in Washington. The stock market today showed a sharp upswing in heavy trading with gains exceeding losses by almost...
How many miles do you have on it?
32,000.
Okay, how many miles you have on it, that doesn't make it an old.
Mr. Compton,
Not old as
I was supposed to meet this guy with whom I'm taking the bar exam.
You better take off. We might be here all day. Thank you.
Why shouldn't I trade it in? That miserable car was costing me more than it's worth.
That's what I'm telling you. You could have sold it for more yourself.
Too soon, too soon.
That'll teach you not to gamble.
That's a no-brains hand. You call that massacre gambling?
Yes?
Jury's coming in, sir.
Right.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?
Yes, we have, Your Honor.
Will you please hand the verdict to the bailiff?
Thank you.
Will the clerk please read the verdicts?
Title of court and cause. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Mary Brokaw, guilty of murder in violation of Section 187, Penal Code of California. A felony is charged in count 1 of the indictment, and we further find it to be murder in the first degree.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is that your verdict?
Yes.
So say you one, so say you all?
Yes.
The clerk please read the second verdict.
Title of court and cause. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Mary Brokaw, guilty of murder in violation of Section 187, Penal Code of California. A felony is charged in count 2 of the indictment, and we further find it to be murder in the first degree.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is this your verdict?
Yes.
Yes. So say you one, so say you all?
Yes.
Any luck with those places up in Carmel?
He must have been a new man. Cab driver didn't know his way to the airport. Besides, I always get a cold at the beach.
V.
She was guilty, wasn't she?
Both counts.
I know your face.
And I've missed yours.
Each one gets tougher than the last, doesn't it?
When you have to rewrite the books.
Pretty woman, wasn't she?
Until she found a new way to murder. That's what gnaws at you, V, in this business. The minute you start the case control sheet on it, you get trouble for a roommate. You know in the next 20 minutes you'll be giving the murder gimmick the greatest publicity right since Cain and Abel. You can't settle for it raw. You gotta win it all. Completely. Conclusively. Beyond a reasonable doubt. Then you bury the gimmick and not the victim. It goes in the books. It's not new anymore. It's old. And last year's murder just doesn't work. Anyway, that's what brought us all down out of the trees. And as long as that's true, I'll stay at it.
You know something? You're a nice man. Let's go home.
A Mrs. Caldwell telephoned from the adoption department. I returned the call.